Welcome back. I'm Ray. Welcome back to Delta Brewing's website. Now this is going to be a very short video. I just want to talk for a minute about fermentation vessels. Now questions have come up regarding the best type of vessel to use for fermenting beer. Well, there really is no best or perfect container for fermentation. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. After all, as has been said before, the ancient Egyptians fermented in clay jars and pots. And from antiquity right up to our modern age, brewers, and vintners for that matter, have used wooden kegs and vats for not only fermentation, but to serve their beverages. So whether you ferment in clay jars and sip the finished product through straws, dip it from a wooden vat that it was fermented in with a ladle, or tap it from a closed keg, the vessel is not only going to partially determine the finished product, but hopefully give you what you were expecting. And I emphasize hopefully. What you do need to be concerned with, however, is which one produces the beer that you want. If you change styles or configurations, will it change the character of the beer? Now the answer to this question is, it might. Now in today's world, you have the advantage of a multitude of fermentation vessels to choose from, and your imagination may see no limits to what's available. For the past 40 years or so, home brewers have been using food-grade plastic buckets like these to, at the very least, conduct the primary fermentation, and then followed up with a secondary fermentation using glass carboys like these behind me. However, over the past 10 years or so, some brew suppliers and manufacturers have come up with some innovations that mimic the professional systems, and they all work very well within their particular guidelines. But for most of us, it's still the plastic bucket and the glass carboy. Now there are lots of advantages to the plastic bucket. It is lightweight. It can be drilled, tapped, punched, vented, and covered, or not. And they are relatively inexpensive. If you make a mistake in the alterations or you damage it, you're only out $5 or so and not 50, 60, or even hundreds. The disadvantages are, one, they are translucent. So they need to be kept in dark places or covered somehow because you want to keep light away from the product. And two, they are made of plastic. Plastic scratches easily. And those scratches can be hiding places for bacteria or pathogens that can harm or even destroy your beer. So good sanitation practices are a must and can help avoid some of these problems. Now the glass carboys are very much the standard for home brewers. They are impermeable, they don't scratch inside, they still need to be kept in the dark because they are transparent, but being transparent, they allow you to watch the action of the fermentation process. The disadvantage is they are heavy. They range anywhere from 10 to 18 pounds. They're also breakable and can be slippery of handling while wet. There are, however, carboys available now made of PET, what we call PET, which is polyethylene terephthalate. You want to try to say that 10 times. Okay, this was once known more commonly as used in the clothing industry by its trade name of Dacron, which is a polymer resin that is commonly used in the food industry for containers and can be configured in different ways, including hard, scratch-resistant containers, as well as transparent bottles and carboys. What's nice is these are lightweight, generally 2 pounds or less. They tend to be less slippery when wet, and they are not breakable, at least in the sense of, whoops, it just slipped out of my hand while I was cleaning it. You do need to know, however, they are not necessarily cheaper than the glass carboys. Now there are some alternatives to these. For instance, you could use a large stainless steel pot like this, or kettle, to ferment both the primary and secondary. As a more advanced brewer, you may want to use your mash tun for a fermenter, after the boil is over, of course. Now the lid can be configured to clamp down and can be drilled for a blow-off. A valve and temperature probe can also be added, just like this has. Or if you're using a mash tun, these are most likely already installed. Now there are some companies out there, like Spidell, that are producing translucent, flat-bottom fermenters in different sizes, also made of food-grade polyethylene. You can also use something like this. This is a pet food container. These are made for dog food, cat food, horse feed, bird seed, and anything else that needs to be stored in the food type category. They are also pet food grade plastic. They have a threaded lid with a food grade gasket, a wide opening like this, and they come in different sizes. This one being just a little over 9 gallons to the bottom of the extrusion. You can also use these to store your grain if you do all grain brewing, and they are bug and air tight. Let me get rid of that for a minute. The point is, of course, you need to use your imagination. You never know what you might come up with. Okay? Now there are manufacturers out there that are now producing small, professional style conical fermenters just for the home brewer. Some are made from this same PET material, and some are made from stainless steel, but all of them attempt to be smaller innovations of the professional fermenters you might see at a commercial brewery. People like Blickman, SS Brewing Technology, More Beer and Stout Tanks, among others, are all producing conical fermenters in stainless steel, and still others like Fast Ferment, Spidell, who I mentioned earlier, and Mini Brew are producing conical fermenters in PET. Now, those of you who are already beginning to use draft systems may want to configure a corny keg to use with a secondary fermenter, like this. These can be fixed with a blow-off tube, like this, pretty easily. They work very well as a secondary fermenter. They do not, however, work very well as a primary fermenter because they are only 5 gallons. Now, there may be some who are more advanced in their brewing category who may want to configure a union type system using something like this. This is a firkin. Firkins are made for ale that is pumped instead of driven with CO2 or nitrogen. This particular one is 10.8 gallons. It's great for a union system, and these are relatively cheap compared to most kegs. Now, the use of firkins in a union type system is something I will get into in a more advanced section, generally pertaining to professional or semi-pro brewing for the small commercial or even the advanced home brewer. But for now, keep in mind that there are many, many different ways to set up and configure a fermentation system. Okay, with that being said, let me end this by saying there are some things to keep in mind, the most important of which is the physical dynamics that take place within different sizes and shapes of these vessels. Conical fermenters, for instance, tend to move the yeast and carbon dioxide vertically from the tip of the cone, causing the yeast to rise up the center of the fermenter and drop back down the sides. Now, this can and usually does cause fermentation to accelerate, which in itself can create different beer profiles from the flat or round bottom fermenters that tend to move the yeast and carbon dioxide in an even distribution throughout the fermenting beer. So, if and when you decide to change types or style configurations, you may have to alter or tweak your beer recipe to get the same profile that you become used to. So keep that in mind for the future. So for now, take a look at some of the alternatives. I've posted as many as I can find on this website. So with that being said, this is Ray for Delta Brewing, and I will see you in the next video.